Well, you knew it would come to this. When Enes Kanter Freedom declared himself eligible for the WNBA draft, the woke media lost their minds because how dare someone disingenuously claim that they're a female and then try to go and dominate a women's sport? Well, that just raises a great question. Why do we assume that all these transgender athletes are involved in women's sports for laudable reasons? And why do we assume that they're being sincere and honest and not simply running a long con on our professional sports leagues? Well, Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White decided to call their bluff and said you need to have a consistent and intellectually defensible definition that would hold up in a court of law to say that we cannot be a member of your WNBA league, or you're looking at potential discrimination lawsuits, because if it is subjective who is a male and a female, then who becomes the judge over what is in a former NBA player's minds when they declare themselves eligible for the women's sports? Because they can just say that I identify as a female, and that should be the reason that they should be allowed to be in the league. And so Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White, they are being treated with a lot of hostility by the league and by WNBA players, and it's being escalated and brought to a boil because Enes Kanter Freedom got in an incident the other night, and Chicago Sky, the players and the coaches, well, they wanted him removed, and he was just kicked out. Well, 2 days later, after the ban from the team's arena, there was an official statement where the Chicago Sky said, quote, "He has demonstrated to us unequivocally that he has the potential to be a threat." And that's what the Sky owner confirmed to ESPN.
Why wasn't Enes given a warning?
I can only answer for the reason. Just, I mean, you're kind of making me repeat over and over, so I think at some point we need to move on. But he wasn't given a warning because certain threats don't get warnings. He was given a lot of leeway. As I said, he was sitting there and he was trash talking her and all that. So he was certainly given leeway. But at a certain point, you know, when somebody, I mean, to use an extreme example, when you shoot a gun at someone, you don't get a warning. Don't do that again. It's your action doesn't deserve a warning. You take action that becomes a threat, you don't get a warning.
But it looks like he was just there wearing a t-shirt, talking about the definition of a woman on it.
I did not cross over the baseline or sideline, and we're not allowed to touch any players, obviously, the fans. So I didn't break any rules. So for them to come out and throw me out of the game and literally, they said his actions was equal to shooting a gun. I just cannot believe it. I don't know who is his PR person, but they're doing a terrible job. So we might be looking into a lawsuit for sure, because this is unacceptable and this is not what a sportsmanship look like. Natasha Kulat should be the one that's thrown out of the game or get fined. We wrote to commissioner and the task force. We are waiting for them to hear back, but this is just unacceptable. This is not what a sportsmanship look like. So we'll just wait to see what happens.
And using their own playbook against them. That is Linsky 101. The radical left has been doing that for generations. And it's nice to see Enes Kanter Freedom give them a taste of their own medicine. But it shows that on the underbelly of wokeness, there is a real resistance to being challenged publicly for its positions. And that's because they are intellectually indefensible. They're based on subjectivity. And therefore, if the whole vulnerable underbelly of this is that if you object to it publicly, the whole thing falls apart, because subjectivity is not a real standard for a legal system. It's not a real standard for a culture. It's not a real standard for anything. It's turtles all the way down. And we've seen the scourges of postmodernism and identity politics wreak havoc on our system over and over and over again. It says simply because if you identify a certain way, then you are entitled to privileges. Now, a lot of people like to bandy about this term white privilege as if you were born with a certain skin color and that makes you immune from any of life's problems, and therefore you are a privileged member of society. But this is, of course, is nonsense. But of course, there isn't white privilege in our society. If anything, whites are scapegoated for all of society's problems, as are males and Christians and conservatives. They are not given a platform in the media. They are often castigated and ridiculed and mocked and torn down. And this is called equity. And so it's interesting, who are the whites who are getting privilege in our society? Are they getting any DEI benefits? Are they getting any privileges just from having their skin color? I really want people to think critically about that. Or is it just an accusation that is brought to bear for dishonest reasons as a rationale to redistribute our wealth, to have equity programs, to cause social division and conflict? The way to end racism in America is to stop causing racial grievances. And that runs in all directions. Whites versus blacks, blacks versus Latinos, Asians versus whites. If you divide American up by different characteristics like that, and then you hand out perks and privileges and punishments based on those criteria, you are having a never-ending system of racial grievance. And that is precisely what the woke media wants in this country. And so when Enes Kanter Freedom speaks up and says, you know what, I will identify as transgender, as a female, for the purposes of exploiting your weakness in the subjective argument, well, then their only reaction is hysteria and censorship and banning him from arenas and trying to punish him. But we'll see how that works out, because this Justice Department is really serious about going after civil rights violations. And Harmeet Dillon over there at the Department of Justice, well, I think she might be very interested in this case should it continue to be pushed. Now, the WNBA, it has, practically speaking, according to multiple sources that I covered at Red State, said that Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White are not going to be considered eligible for the WNBA. But they haven't released an official statement saying why. I'm sure their lawyers are looking at it right now very carefully, because it's going to invite a lawsuit if there's anything there that can be challenged. And of course, their position is rubbish. So, and here's one more interesting thing about all of this before we wrap up. The American public is not even on board with this woke agenda. They don't see there's I saw there was a poll. It was on LinkedIn, actually. I don't know. I've just been on LinkedIn a few times recently. Trust me, I don't like skimming social media there. It's really ridiculous. But there was a poll about defining women and if it's controversial or not. 97% of respondents said that it is not controversial. And of course, there's other public opinion polls at Gallup, etc., that show 65-70% of Americans think that women should be protected from men, biological men, going into their sports under the name of transgender or anything else. But weigh in with your own thoughts about this story. We always appreciate hearing from you at the Becker Brief.